Welcome to Seas of Change's next episode of Ocean Views. We are so incredibly excited to welcome our next guest, Ana. Ana, please introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Mel, and Lara for having me here for today's episode. As Mel mentioned, my name is Ana Hanhausen. I'm based and I was actually born in Mexico City, so I'm here in Mexico as we speak. And my work is mainly focused on tackling plastic pollution through the organization Plastic Oceans Mexico, where I am currently sub-director. And I also help the youth address climate change through different actions that they can take from a personal to a local level through an app that we have that is called We Do. We're actually launching it in Mexico very soon. I'll talk about that a little bit further. But yeah, so basically I focus on plastic pollution and climate change.
So Talara and I know that you do a lot of amazing work with the organizations that you are part of and your organization that you're sub-director for, which is a lot of work. So how do you balance your formal job and also working with these organizations?
I think that's a great question because it's definitely something that's taken me some time to get accustomed to. It was not something that from the very first day I was able to balance, but something important is to keep in line your priorities. And there's times where there are really big priorities at the organizations and times where there are really big priorities at the startup. So I always try to balance out what is more urgent or faster to do in each side, and that's usually how I prioritize my work. Something that I also think is very important is being very open with your communication on both sides so that they know that you're committed on both sides, but that you also have to attend certain things that are not related to the organization. That way they are more comprehensive, they can work around your schedule, and it will be easier for you to always keep that balance.
Oh yeah, it's very important to keep that kind of balance when you're doing so much, like different things all at once. So if you do so much with different organizations, obviously environmental conservation is very important to you. So how did you become interested in environmental conservation in the first place? Was it like something that you grew up with, or was it like a big moment of realization?
It's kind of like a mix between those two, because I was partially involved and then I had this big moment where I got completely involved, right? So as I was growing up, for example, I would always go to the ocean with my family, and I would remember all of these times with a lot of joy and a lot of happiness. And I always wanted to protect the ocean and marine animals, right? It was very important for me. However, as I kept studying, it wasn't something that was part of my priorities, to say it that way. I wasn't really doing any work focused on that. But as I started my degree in chemical engineering, I realized that it was possible to focus chemical engineering towards environmental conservation, right? Since we work a lot with, we can calculate emissions, we can work a lot with different chemicals, things like that, to kind of like see what are some better solutions that we can implement. So when I was doing my degree, I started getting more involved in the organization of different congresses and things that had to do with conservation. So like the International Sustainability Congress that we would do every year at the university. But so this is how I was little by little involved, right? But there was this one moment where I was like, you know what, I have to put all my attention to this because it's a really big issue. Then this was actually close to an earthquake that was here in Mexico. I don't know if you guys heard of it, but in 2017 there was a big earthquake here in Mexico, and we actually had to stop school for like a week. And we didn't have it was just the beginning of the school year, so wasn't like much to do. We were helping around like the different towns that were affected, but we still had a ton of time, like just at home, waiting for everything to come back to normal again. So during that time, I started watching environmental documentaries, and I just like binge watched all the documentaries that I could find on Netflix. And when I finished, I remember that my first thought was like, okay, I have all this information now. I know everything that's happening. What am I gonna do about it? I can't just sit on this information and kind of like let it be. I realize now that I have the power to start changing things where I'm standing. So I want to do something about it. Because something very specific that I saw in one of these documentaries was a younger person interviewing an older person, and he asked the older person like, oh, hey, what do you recommend for the younger generation? And he said, do whatever you can to help this issue, because whenever you're my age and you see how that there's not a long time for you left, you're gonna be you're gonna be disappointed that you didn't do everything that was in your hand to stop this issue, right? So I thought that I was like, okay, I know this issue, I can do something about it, I'm gonna start now. And that was like the big moment that got me started in organizations and conservation work and everywhere I could get involved.
That sounds amazing. And I loved hearing about this amazing journey that you've been on, and especially how you've watched those documentaries. I'm sure we all have binge watched a few David Attenborough. Love David Attenborough documentaries. He's the best. But we're just interested in what the next steps for you. So we've learned about how you kind of started on this journey and realizing that you need to take action. But have you got any current or upcoming projects that you'd like to share? Maybe the app that you're launching?
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned, I have like two main lines of work. So with the app, it's a startup that we're creating. To kind of give you a background, the other co-founder, her name is Dani, and we were both environmental activists, but here in Mexico, there was so much to do, but it was so complicated to find what were the most effective actions that you could take, not only at a personal level with changing your habits, but also how you could get more involved in your communities in order to have an impact. We realized we could make this easier through an app, so that's what we're developing. We've been developing for about a year and we're ready to launch. We actually have our soft launch this week, and within the next month, we're going to be spreading it out more and everything. So if anyone listening is from Mexico, you'll be able to download the app. We do pretty soon. And on the other hand, with Plastic Oceans, we have our Trees and Seas Festival coming up in September, which is this big festival where we emphasize on the importance of the relationship between marine conservation and forest conservation, right? Because the cycle of water, and there's so many things that are related between ecosystems. And just to kind of give you an idea, last year was our first Trees and Seas Festival. And we, with the work of our partners and many allies that we had across the world, we were able to plant over 100,000 trees and pick up 2.3 million square meters of trash from the beaches across the globe. So it was actually a really big impact, and it was so inspiring to really see our work of the year just put together into 1 week, right? So I'm excited that that's coming up again in September. And actually, we have the option of organizing like different events wherever you're located. So if anyone wants to add an event to the Trees and Seas Festival, you are more than welcome to.
That sounds like an amazing festival to be a part of. Millions of square meters of trash. That's insane. And so many trees. That's like, my mind just for a second now. I was like, wow, that's so impactful. But obviously you've done so much. How has COVID sort of like forced you to like change the way you've been, going through your work these past few years?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, because when I started working in conservation, it was all in person, right? It was before the pandemic. But when my conservation work has gotten the strongest and when I really dedicated the most time has actually been during the COVID pandemic. So I think on one side, it made us stop all our in-person events. So that had an effect on what we were doing, and it made us shift towards more virtual alternatives to continue our mission on both sides, right? Our mission to reduce plastic pollution and promote a circular economy, and also our mission to help people get more involved in the climate action solutions that they can get involved in, right? And this made us shift our perspectives, and I think it was something that it took us a few months to get used to, but in the end, it made us really diversify our types of work, which was really good. And something that was really interesting during the pandemic is that I got to meet a ton of people from across the globe and work with them, right? So maybe if we were all just doing in-person events, I would have just met people maybe in Mexico, sometimes maybe in the US. But since we are working online, I've got to meet people from every corner of the world. And it's really broadened our approach to sustainability, right? Because it helps you see it from different perspectives, and this makes your climate action fight stronger.
For sure. I definitely think that for us as well, COVID has made us kind of branch out and look at other ways of broadcasting what we want to show and different ways of acting on that. And I definitely think that we wouldn't have met you without COVID, because we met last year. So that's good. But on the flip side, COVID being kind of a challenge, what has been your proudest memory so far?
Do you mean during the pandemic or like in general?
In general.
Okay. Oh, this is a good question because I feel like there's been so many small moments that have built up to everything we've been doing. But I think a big proud moment was being awarded the Youth Medal of Merit by the Mexican government, which was a big honor. I was invited to the Congress of Mexico City, and there were a lot of people who were there to give me the medal, and it really uh, gave me these tools to approach these politicians and ask for better policies, and really approach them from a different perspective, right? Because you're saying, hey, you're giving me a medal because I'm promoting climate action, but what are you doing as well? So it really helped me like change my perspective about how far my contributions could go. So I think that was a really proud moment for me. And also so many like little things that are the sum of our work, right? So for example, last year during the Tree Senses Festival, we went to the Riviera Maya, to a beach that is actually closed off to tourists because it's an area of conservation that gets a lot of green turtles. And so we did a cleanup there, and at night we came back to see the turtles who were doing their nests. And we got some stats of, hey, since the beach is cleaner, this is how many more turtles we've been getting in. And this is like the impact we've had. And it was just so inspiring to really see our work put to results.
Yeah, definitely. When you see like how impactful you make in person to the animals living in those environments around you, it just kind of like makes you feel happy. And absolutely, congratulations on that award. That sounds amazing. It's definitely got you the chance, like, speak to like government and have them change the way they're thinking as well. So that's a great opportunity. Congratulations. Obviously, on the flip side again, COVID being one of the big challenges that changed the way a lot of us did our work. What have been some other challenges that you have faced, and how have you learned from or overcome them?
Yeah, I feel like so many different challenges have arisen from the different work you're doing, right? So even when you're just starting conservation work, there are small steps that you need to get into and to start solving. And this really gives you the basis to solve bigger problems once you're further along the road. So I think even if these challenges have been really tough, they've really helped me like shape the conservation work we're doing right now. I think some of the main challenges that I have very much in mind, because they've been very recent, have gotten to do with the app we're developing. Because I think it's been hard to realize that not everyone is as motivated to protect the environment as the circle we usually interact with is, right? So I'm used to talking to a lot of activists and a lot of young people who want to make things different, but sometimes when we would go further out and talk to decision makers in companies or in governments, sometimes they would be a little bit more skeptic of what we were doing. So I think that was kind of demotivating. But on the other side, this challenge made us realize, you know what, we need to step up our game. We need to make things like, we need to have a bigger voice even. So I think it was a challenge that we had to overcome in order to continue our work. I think other challenges have really been related to staying motivated. I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes you see bad news all around you and just like negativity, and there's so much eco-anxiety that really harms how you approach all of these issues and your motivation towards these issues. However, what's really helped me overcome this is focus where I am, realize that there's something that I can do where I am right now, and through different actions, even if they're small and from there they grow, I can realize that this being able to do something about it has really reduced these feelings of hopelessness, to kind of call it that way, right? Especially, I'm gonna go a bit off topic here, but I think you might find this interesting. I think I've shared it with you guys before, actually. So Mexico previously was doing some positive steps towards using more renewables, but with the new president and the new current administration in the government, there's been some like going backwards with how they're promoting renewables and what we're like, how we are decarbonizing the country. So it was very unmotivating to see how people with a great deal of power to make decisions in favor of the planet were not doing them, right? And they were actually making decisions that are going to harm our generation and many, many more to come. So I think that this was probably one of my most challenging moments. And it was actually recently, like during the pandemic. But the good thing is that from there, the youth from many different organizations came together and we started to make more effective tactics in order to address what's been going on.
I definitely agree that it is such a challenge, and it is so strange when you go out of your circle of activists and climate enthusiasts and you realize that, oh, people aren't actually as educated as you think, and it is such a shame, but then it just kind of makes our work even more important. So I guess that's kind of that burst of enthusiasm. But you talk about working with youth a lot. In your opinion, how powerful do you believe the voices of youth are, and what would be your advice for them?
So I think the voices of the youth are very powerful and very important to the fight against climate change. However, sometimes it's hard to see this, right? So I think it's always important to keep it in mind as a source of motivation and also as a source of reminding ourselves how important our fight is. Because we are this sign of how our generation and the generations after us will be the most affected. So if we don't speak up, we're not only failing our generation, but the ones to come. So I think we always need to make sure our voices are heard, our perspectives are taken into account, and always considering that as much as sometimes we feel like we're not being taken into account, many voices coming together, everyone acting together towards the same goal can really make a difference. And we're starting to see it across the globe, right? There's countries who are finally starting to include more youth representatives in company boards or in governments or things like that. So I think this really puts into perspective that it's very powerful, and we're making good steps towards making sure that they're listened to, but we shouldn't let these positive steps hold our voice back, right? We need to keep them going for with the biggest power. And my advice for aspiring change makers, I think, would be to just do it, right? Just go ahead and be the change maker you know you can be, because I feel like sometimes we are held back thinking, oh, you know what, I don't know enough yet. I don't know where to start, or I'm not sure if this will actually make an impact. It definitely will make an impact, and you have to try and learn from there and continue kind of doing iteration of your work in order for it to be the most impactful it will ever be. So I feel like going over that little stone of, I don't want to do anything yet because I'm not sure what to do is the most important thing to actually become the most effective change maker.
Yeah, definitely. As young people, we kind of just hold ourselves back thinking, we're still young, they're not going to listen to us. But then once we do take those steps, we have to keep going. We can't just stop at that level. We have to keep moving forward, making more positive change. And that's really important.
Unfortunately, that was our last question, but thank you so much, Ana, for giving us your time and sharing your wonderful wisdom and advice.
On the contrary, thank you so much, girls, for having me here in this session. I was really happy to talk to you guys, and I really liked the question, so thank you so much.